Life is so uncertain. Despite all your attempts to the contrary, you can never predict something with 100% accuracy. Oh sure, you may get things right, but my point is that everything is up to chance until the moment it happens. Life is unpredictable in more ways than one. There is, however, one thing in life that is certain. One thing that was set in stone the moment you were born, and that cannot be changed or avoided. One thing that you can actually predict with 100% accuracy. That one absolute certainty in life is, ironically, death. The only thing you can truly be certain of in life is that one day, it will all end. This, of course, rings true even for fictional characters. At some point in our stories, we will want to finish off certain characters. Whether it's for reasons related to plot, character, or just for the sake of shocking the reader, you likely will want to cut a character's life short at some point. Stories are a proxy by which we can understand the real world and life in general. So unless you only ever write children's stories or something equally innocent, you'll want to know how to have a character's death mean something. In this video, we'll look at some of the tools and techniques at our disposal in order to have the deaths of our characters be meaningful. To some extent. It doesn't always have to be incredibly dramatic, and it doesn't always have to have some extremely deep meaning. But it must have a purpose. I'm getting ahead of myself though. For now, we'll cover some of the basics, such as when to kill your fictional characters, how to go about it, and some common mistakes you'll want to avoid along the way. But before we jump in, remember to please hit the like button. Engagement is the main metric YouTube uses to push out my video to new people. And short of leaving a comment, the like button is the next best thing to tell YouTube that it should show this video to more people. It's easy, it's free, and you'd be doing a massive service to this channel and community. If you really like the channel, then consider subscribing as well, so that you don't miss follow-up videos when they go live. As I mentioned a moment ago, a character's death must have purpose. It can be a death to further the plot, or to develop a character arc. It could even be death just to set the tone and scene or to emphasize some form of world building or characterization. Regardless of why you're killing the character, there must be a purpose. If there is no purpose, meaning you just killed a character for the sake of killing them, then you leave your reader uncaring at best or severely disappointed at worst. There must be a reason for killing off a character. If there is no purpose to the death within the narrative, then you may as well not kill the character at all. If it makes no difference, then it might as well not happen. So now that we have that established, and you're confident that your character death has a purpose, now we can start looking at when you want to kill off the character. The most obvious time to kill off a character is at the end of their character arc, or at the end of the protagonist's character arc. You'll find this is typically used in the final battle against the antagonist, if you're writing sci-fi or fantasy. The hero fights the villain and one of the companions die in the struggle. It serves to make the stakes in the story more concrete and can serve as a good way to tie up a character's story. This is generally the easiest and more common way to kill off a major character. It's the kind of death you'll find more in young adult fiction, since it's less striking and less of an emotional gut punch most of the time. You'll usually use this on a character that's more of a companion or side character than you would use it on the protagonist. You can use it on the protagonist at the end of their story, of course, and Brandon Sanderson has some excellent examples of that, but in general, you'll use this on a side character. The next instance where you'll want to kill off a character is in the middle of the character's arc. This one is much more of an emotional gut punch and evokes a lot more empathy from the reader. If your character is busy progressing towards a goal or busy changing for the better, but you kill them before they get there, then you're tapping into an existential fear of most people. Most people are aware that they will die one day, but they live in fear that they won't be able to do all the things they want to do before it happens. People generally fear dying before they tick off their bucket list, so killing a character in the same way will tap into that same fear and cause a pretty intense emotional reaction. Don't do this frivolously, however. This packs an emotional punch for a reason, and you'd be undermining it if you're just trying to get a reaction out of the reader. The idea is to have the death be meaningful as well as impactful. One other instance you'll want to focus on when deciding when to have a character die is when you need to develop another character. Basically, you're killing off a character to move along the character arc of a different character. Generally, the character that dies won't necessarily have their own arc, but they can have one if you want to make their death more impactful. The point of this, however, is to move other characters along, and thus deaths of this kind are more for side characters that we don't get as much time with. This one is tricky to use, since you could easily not have the impact you want. The dying character needs to have some relevance or connection to the characters who will be affected by the death. The reader will care only if your viewpoint character does. If the viewpoint character doesn't care enough or isn't affected enough, then your reader will feel a disconnect between how impactful the death feels and how much influence it actually has on characters in the story. Deciding when to kill a character can be quite a balancing act, but getting it right can only come with time and practice. Now that we've covered the importance of a character's death and when to use it, I'd like to mention some important factors to consider if you want your deaths to be meaningful or impactful. The first and most important point I'd like to bring up is that your reader has to care. Your reader has to care. It doesn't matter if they love the character that's dying or if they hate the character. It doesn't matter if the death makes them cry in sorrow or jump for joy. What does matter is that they have an emotional reaction. Apathy is your enemy here. Most people enjoy stories because of the characters. Characters draw people into a story and make it memorable. This is because we as humans are a social species. It's instinct to take an interest in other people, even fictional ones. So as long as you make your reader care, you'll never struggle to get an emotional reaction out of them. If they don't care, however, then the character death will be meaningless. But let's say you do actually get the reader to care. Then you need to decide on the timing. And it's not the timing in terms of when in the story, but more along the lines of how quick the death is. If it's a quick and sudden death, your reader will feel more of an emotional blow since it's unexpected. If it's drawn out, the emotional blow won't be sharp, but it will likely be longer lasting since you had to build up to it. Picture a death where someone dies on the battlefield or in an accident, compared to someone slowly succumbing to a sickness or severe injury. Both can be impactful, but each one will have a different level of impact compared to the other. So you need to decide on just how sudden you want this death to be, because that will have a massive impact on the emotions your reader will feel. And lastly, you'll want to try and tie the death into the character arc in some way. I'm not saying you should force things, but if the method or circumstances of the death has some kind of tie into the character arc, then count it as a bonus. It's not absolutely necessary, but having that poetic symmetry to an extent will definitely go a long way towards making the death more impactful and memorable. To make a silly and simple example, if you have a man who loves money, but then dies from being crushed by a pile of gold coins, that's the kind of tie-in I'm talking about. It's a silly example, but I use it to make the point. You can even invert it to make the rich man die of starvation, since it's a cruel twist of irony. Anything that ties in like that will do a lot for the character death you're trying to pull off. Like I said, it's more of a bonus if you can pull it off, but I wouldn't stress too much about it if you're still a very new writer. I just want to briefly cover some things you should try to avoid when it comes to character deaths. Some of these are pet peeves and aren't hard rules or anything, but they definitely don't add to your character death in any way. First off, we have fake out deaths. Basically, don't make the reader think your character is dead only to discover they were alive this whole time. The same goes for bringing a character back to life, since it amounts to the same thing. This isn't necessarily bad, and it can be done well. See Sanderson for examples, but it's so easy to get wrong and tick a reader off that I'd rather avoid it entirely. Next, we have cheap deaths. Basically killing a character for an emotional payoff where that character's whole existence was purely so they could die at the right time. The famous red shirts from Star Trek come to mind. Characters you kill off purely for the sake of having someone to kill off and not because it serves the plot in any way. That is something you definitely want to avoid, because it just cheapens the concept of death completely. And finally, similar to cheap deaths, we have pointless deaths. These are characters where they actually have a story arc and are important, but you kill them because you don't know what to do with them, or you just want some kind of emotional payoff for the reader. Killing a character for cheap reasons like this will only result in pissing off your reader and won't win you any points when it comes to future, actually meaningful deaths. Thank you very much for watching. I sincerely appreciate all your time and attention. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, since that's one of the biggest metrics that YouTube looks at when recommending it. And if you'd like to see more, please hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified of future videos. Take care, and we'll talk again very soon.